I'm going to start off this video with a comparison between the GoPro camera microphone and the Tascam 4-track setup with the two external microphones, one in the engine compartment, the other aimed at the exhaust. Basically to show why audio was the first major upgrade I did for my audio-visual telemetry setup. Well, I'm sure you could tell that pretty obvious difference, but you may be asking yourself, well, what do I got to get and how much is this going to cost me? I'm going to keep a running tally of the cost of this project in the bottom right corner, so keep an eye out for that. Well, the first major item, at least, is the Tascam 4-track recorder. This Tascam recorder has two internal microphones that I use for the cabin. It has two XLR ports at the bottom for external microphones. Speaking of the external mics, these are the Behringer C2s. I went with these mics due to their relatively low cost, decent specs, and low form factor size that I felt would be easier to package. These mics are essentially doing most of the work. The two mics in the cabin still suffer from wind noise even with a windsock over them, regardless of where you put it. With the windows open, you're just going to get wind noise. So these two microphones are really doing a lot of the work. And their placement is really important because, again, you have to cut down on wind noise, and that's the main objective. I'm going to go ahead and add $100 to the total for microphone cables, SD cards, and other miscellaneous gear you need to buy. Next, I'll discuss the placement of these microphones. You see the engine placement here, if you're familiar with the Audi engine, is slightly above the turbos. That was the main audio feature I wanted to hear in the engine. I wanted to hear wastegates, in addition to the mechanical items in the engine. So I felt this was the best placement for that. Also safety. I didn't want to destroy a mic or destroy an engine by something falling. The next main objective was to find a soft mounting point that would allow it to flex and move. So I wanted to find rubber features or hoses or something of that nature. I also ended up using the microphone cable in a way as its own stand and kind of kept it suspended a little bit also. The idea is to not hard mount these microphones so they don't vibrate too harshly with chassis vibrations over bumps and over turns and whatnot. The engine microphone's cable is routed to the recorder point, which is between the passenger and the driver's seat, centrally located in the vehicle. Right next to that XLR cable is a USB port, which is powered by a 5-volt power supply in the dash. That USB port would power my audio recorder in session, so I didn't have to use the battery power. For the exhaust microphone, I kept it in the trunk area aimed at the exhaust tips. You can see I made a suspended microphone stand using straps and the cable itself. Again, with these external microphones, you want to suspension mount them as much as possible to allow them to move freely and not vibrate with the chassis. This is my custom camera and audio recorder mount that attaches itself to the posts of the headrest. Here on the other side you can see the audio recorder, centrally located, so it picked up a lot of things, but it basically was wind noise the entire time, even with a windsock over it. This location was also not very helpful in terms of usability. I could not reach the audio recorder unless I was in the back seat, so it was not optimum. It worked, but it was not optimum. Here you see a pretty standard GoPro mount with the suction cup on the rear windscreen aimed at back traffic. Here you see an iPad RAM mount that uses the passenger side seat bolt as a fastener. This was my driver's side view of the iPad mount. It was pretty good. I felt confident that if it were to fail, it would just fall to the floor and wouldn't be a big deal. The biggest problem with this iPad mount location was there's no availability for a passenger. Leg space was taken up by the iPad mount itself. So moving on to the 2000 track-ready Audi S4, I moved the iPad mount to the radio's location and relocated the HVAC to a few inches below its standard location. I also relocated the audio recorder to a more driver-friendly location. With the audio recorder being near the dash, it also acts as a little bit of a wind buffer as well. Here's a slightly dark and congested photo of the iPad mount in the radio's former location. You can see the HVAC controls located just below that. With the iPad holder removed, you can see the mount attached to the right side of the console. I also relocated the cigarette lighter and added a dual USB interface, since most of my devices used USB to charge or run off of. Here you see the OBD2 GoPoint device that I use for telemetry dangling from a fishing line that kind of acts as a safety cord just in case it were to fall, but also as a convenient place to just hang it when I'm not using it. Next you'll see the GPS location in the 2000 Track S4. This location has changed. This is actually the second location. The first time I had it centrally located, but I would get GPS errors frequently. So I moved it to this front windscreen location that gets a good view of the sky, and I haven't had any GPS issues since then. I do have a Velcro strap around the front HVAC vent that holds it on there firmly. Here's my new multi-point articulated arm camera mount that is attached to the roll cage. And now the new microphone locations in the newer Track vehicle. The engine microphone location I had in the previous S4 was not available in this one, so I had to find a new location for it. In this case, again, I wanted to find soft rubber hoses to mount to. Here you see a close-up of the engine microphone mounted to coolant hoses. If one of those hoses were to fail, I'm sure that microphone is gone. That's just something you have to kind of live with. I wanted to improve the exhaust microphone by having it virtually outside or aimed a little closer or in a little closer proximity to the actual exhaust tips. So in this vehicle I put it inside of the bumper shell, aimed directly at the exhaust tips. In this case I ended up putting a little additional foam, more for NVH, basically getting rid of noise and vibration of the microphone itself while it was inside the bumper cavity. This is a little bit of a close-up of me pushing the microphone into place in an upper cavity portion that allowed me to aim it at the exhaust tips. You can just barely see the green foam indicating where the microphone is in the bumper cavity in this photo. In this photo you can see some of the microphone cable routing that has to go to the front mounted location where the recorder is. You probably have to custom make your own cables, as routing the large XLR end will be virtually impossible through the vehicle's small firewall cavities and other holes. Finally, I'm going to discuss what you do when you have all these files put together, because you have to synchronize your audio and your video now that they're captured on two different sources. And the way to do that is to basically clap your hands in front of the camera while all of your equipment is running. As long as your front camera, your rear camera, and your cabin mics are all within earshot, they should all pick up your clapping sound, and as long as you do it within your front camera's view, you'll be able to align them up in your non-linear video editing program. As you see here in Vegas, you see the front camera on the timeline along with the cabin mic audio right below it. You basically see the same claps on both audio files. You align those. After aligning your video with your main cabin audio, you align your exhaust and your engine mics to the main cabin audio, since they were recorded at the same time on the same machine. If you have a rear camera, you align your rear camera with your front camera and or cabin mics, and you're good to go. If your cameras are outside the vehicle, it'll be a little bit more difficult to align it, and you'll probably have to use features outside, engine sound, something externally to align. But this is essentially what I use to create my track day videos. In theory, the only thing stopping you from using a 5.1 setup on your final video is your video editing program. Unfortunately for me in Vegas, I cannot use 1080p along with 5.1 audio, or I would be. I'd essentially be using the engine mic in the center channel, the cabin mics in front left and front right, and the rear would be exhaust. And I have done that in some circumstances. In the end, stereo ends up being just fine and sounds pretty great. And I believe YouTube does not support 5.1 yet. But it is an option. if you so choose to use it. Again, I hope this tutorial helps you guys out and future track day videos can be at their full audio potential.